The year was 2010. I was a young and clueless millennial who was just kicked out by my asshole boomer parents and told that at 20 years old, I needed to pull myself up by the bootstraps and make it in this world. Now, keep in mind, this was right after the diabolical 2008 financial crash that the world never really recovered from. I was going through the exact same thing that a lot of you Gen Z watching are going through today, applying to hundreds of new jobs every day, only to never hear back from anyone at all. My boomer mom kept telling me that I was lazy and needed to get a job, threatening to cut off financial support if I didn't. And I kept trying to explain to her that I was trying, but no one was hiring. The official unemployment rate back then was around 8%, which was a staggering increase from pre-2008 levels. And when I tried to explain this to my boomer mom, she simply retorted, well, that still means 92% of people can get a job, so why can't you? Now, this was, of course, before I knew about all the insidious ways the government manipulates the unemployment statistics to gaslight and blatantly lie to young people. So, naturally, this made me feel quite bad. What was wrong with me that no matter all the hundreds of jobs I applied to, I kept finding myself stuck in the bottom 8% of people who couldn't get a job? It was a weird paradox where, on one hand, you got delusional boomers screaming in your ear, telling you that you gotta get a job. But on the other hand, you got corporate shills refusing to hire you and give you a job even if you desperately want one. Something wasn't quite adding up here, and so I decided to start doing some digging and some research, and what I found out was very, very dark, disturbing, and sinister. But it's also something that every young person from here on out has a right to know. Hey guys, real quick, you may have noticed we're getting very close to 10,000 subscribers now. So if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this magic number. Would really appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. You guys are awesome. So after researching this issue quite thoroughly and obsessively, it turns out that after 2008, the government changed the method in which the official unemployment rate was measured. Before 2008, the official unemployment rate was measured using what they call the U3 unemployment. This is where everybody who doesn't have a job is counted as unemployed. After 2008, however, the joblessness crisis got so bad that in order to save face and lie to the people, the government decided to switch to using the U6 unemployment rate to count official unemployment statistics. So, what's the difference between the U3 and the U6? I'm very glad you asked, as this is where the dark rabbit hole begins. Unlike the U3 unemployment rate, which counts everyone who can't find a job, the U6 unemployment rate does not count people who have just given up on looking for work because the job market is so bad. So since everyone who gave up on work no longer counts as being unemployed, well, of course the unemployment rate is going to be lower. I mean, this would be like if you decided you wanted to set a goal of losing some weight, let's say. Then after struggling with diet and exercise so much, you just give up on your goal of losing weight and just decide, hey, I'm just going to change the way in which my weight is counted. From now on, I am not going to include my body fat weight as a part of my overall weight. All my body fat percentage no longer counts when I step on the scale. And yeah, if you do that, of course you're going to quote unquote lose weight. Now, this was just in 2010. Since then, the government has engaged in even more manipulative and deceitful lies to make the unemployment rate seem lower than it is. They've started to count unstable, low-paying gig work as employment, along with other many similar tactics. The Chinese government a few years ago even announced that they're no longer tracking the youth unemployment rate at all. As if that really solves the problem. Like, hey, I can't seem to lose any weight, so I know what the solution is. I'm just never going to step on a scale to see my weight in the first place. What a genius solution. Problem solved, right? Okay, so jokes aside though, this leads us to the big question. If so many Gen Z and millennials can't get jobs today, no matter how many hundreds or even thousands of times they apply, then why the hell are we so hell-bent on forcing them to work and shaming them for not working? Part 2, 50-50. So, in case you're new here, allow me to introduce myself. I'm the philosophical gamer, a millennial defense lawyer for Gen Z, in the sense that I don't think they're crazy for not wanting to work. In fact, I think they're absolutely right for not wanting to work. In my time on this channel, however, I've come to realize that this is far from the case for all Gen Z. I would say only about 50% of this community consists of Gen Z who actually don't want to work, and the other 50% are ones who do actually want to work, but just don't feel like it anymore after applying thousands of times with no answers in this horrible economy. Now, a common response I get in a lot of my videos is that, but somebody has to work to keep society running. Now, this may be true, however, someone has to work is a far cry from everyone should be forced to work. Now, of course, this does then raise a very interesting moral dilemma. If somebody has to work, but not everyone should be forced to work, well, doesn't that mean that those who are forced to work are forced to take care of those who don't work? This isn't actually true, but let's just accept this proposition at face value for now. The problem is there is another and perhaps an even bigger problem if you believe in the idea that everyone should be forced to work. You see, if you believe in the idea that everyone should be forced to work, then in order to be morally consistent, you also have to believe in the idea that everyone should be guaranteed a job. Forcing, shaming, and humiliating people for not having a job, but not being able to give them a job in the first place, is legitimately sick, twisted, and sadistic. And it's not just a moral issue either. Even from a practical and mathematical standpoint, it is clearly not possible to guarantee everyone a job in this economy. So why are we forcing everyone to work and shaming them for not having a job? There's been a lot of talk recently. I'm sure you've heard about AI getting to a point where it essentially replaces the need for nearly all human labor. But I think we can all agree we're not quite there yet. On the other hand, the massive youth unemployment rates and all these firsthand experiences from young people applying to thousands of jobs with no response clearly proves that we've automated and outsourced enough jobs that we can no longer guarantee everyone a job either. So this is why I don't think it's helpful nor accurate to think about these things in a black and white 0 or 1 binary code dichotomy. Instead, it makes a lot more sense to think about things on a much broader, more nuanced scale. So instead of thinking that either everyone should work or no one should work, let's imagine a scale of 1 to 100. At the number 1, we have a pre-industrial society where everything was dependent on human labor and everyone had to work to keep society going. And as a result, everyone was essentially guaranteed a job. And at the number 100, we have a post-scarcity Star Trek utopia where AI has taken over all the jobs and nobody has to work anymore. At some point, some number on the scale is going to represent a tipping point where there's not enough human jobs available and a universal basic income will become necessary. The only question is where. Let's just say for the sake of argument, it's the number 70. Once we hit 70, on the scale of 1 to 100, it will be indisputable to everyone that UBI is necessary. So where would we be right now? 40, 50, 60? I personally think we are already very close, but this is debatable. What is not debatable, however, is the fact that no matter where you think we currently are right now, we are rapidly hurling towards the tipping point of 70 at a breakneck pace with all these advancements in AI. And as such, it is time we start having a serious discussion about the necessity of work. Does it really make sense to continuously shame young people for not wanting to work when there's clearly not enough jobs to go around anyways? Does the fact that some work needs to be done to uphold society mean that literally everyone should be forced to work, even if they can't find a job? That in and of itself is already quite the oxymoron. How is it that we're so hell-bent on forcing young people to work, but at the same time, not giving them any jobs in the first place? As you can see, this whole thing just makes absolutely no sense and just reeks of this outdated, archaic, and irrelevant cultural mentalities we've built around work through centuries of brainwashing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it is debatable where exactly you think on our scale of 1 to 100, 70 being the point where UBI is necessary. But I personally think, and this is just my own personal opinion, that we might already be there now. Here's why. Part 3. The AI revolution already happened 20 years ago. Whenever you hear all the conversations going on today from AI experts around the necessity for UBI, job loss, mass replacements, layoffs, some people think it's just overhyped, and to be fair, it does sound pretty sensationalist at times. But the thing is, you don't really even need AI to prove to you that this will become necessary. Even if AI were to somehow hypothetically disappear tomorrow, something we all agree is not going to happen, you can still make a very, very good case that universal basic income is already necessary. And here's why. Remember how we started this video by talking about the 2008 financial crash? Have you ever wondered why we never quite seem to recover from 2008? Sure, the government might tell you that we're not in a recession, but as we've already exposed earlier, the government is extremely dishonest and manipulative with their statistics. We've had other depressions and recessions throughout history, but we always bounced back. Even with the Great Depression, we eventually came roaring back from it about a decade later. This current year of 2025 now marks 17 years since the 2008 crash, and yet us Gen Z and Millennials are all still stuck experiencing the exact same problems that we had in 2008. We're still applying to thousands of jobs with no response, still filling in countless online applications with billions of stupid personality test questions, only to never get a response. Still no end in sight and no hope of ever attaining a career, a house, or a family. Why? Why has 2008 specifically been so impossible to recover from? I really thought about this a lot in depth, and I think I finally figured out the answer. A lot of people seem to think that the problem is mass migration. Now, if you don't like mass migration, I don't blame you, and I'm not going to lecture you about racism or whatever, but I don't think this is the cause of our current economic woes, and here's why. Migrants are not taking the decent paying American dream jobs that we were all promised. They're taking the low-paying jobs that wouldn't even pay us enough for basic rent and food, let alone the American dream our parents had. Also, the youth in East Asia are suffering from the exact same problem we are. If migrants were the issue, Japan, Korea, and China would be absolute economic utopia for young people right now, as they're mostly free of migrants. But clearly, this isn't the case. Some people have also blamed this on women entering the workforce, but I don't really buy this either. The booming 90s economy I grew up in as a 90s kid happened well after women entered the workforce, so this didn't make any sense to me at all either. The only ultimate culprit that can explain and account for all this job loss across all these different time periods and places around the world is technology, and specifically the internet. You may not remember a life before the internet if you're Gen Z, but any millennial will tell you how much easier it was to get a job in the pre-internet era. The internet made it so that literally everyone in the world could apply to a job within your community. Countless shopping malls, Blockbuster retail stores, and other businesses that provided very decent paying jobs in the 90s were completely destroyed with the advent of the internet. Now, some will say that the internet created jobs too, but it didn't create nearly as many jobs as it destroyed. For example, Blockbuster at its peak employed over 84,000 employees across the nation. Netflix, which replaced it, only employs 14,000. This means that the internet destroyed nearly 7 times as many jobs as it created. And this is just one example. And this just makes sense when you think about it from a practical standpoint too. A chain movie rental business with thousands of physical locations across the country is going to need more people to work on and maintain than a simple online service like Netflix. So, when I see this conversation about the need for a UBI once AI rolls around, my only thought is that we actually should have been having these conversations 20 years ago with the rise of the internet. Technology has already displaced millions of jobs, and it's the only plausible explanation for why so many young people across so many different countries all over the world are struggling with the exact same issue. Not every country has a migrant crisis, but every country is using the internet now. You can stop companies from hiring illegals in physical locations, but you can't stop them from simply outsourcing jobs via the internet. So it's not crazy that we're having conversations about technological advancement leading to a UBI right now. It's crazy that we didn't have this conversation a long, long time ago. Conclusion. I'm going to conclude this video by extending an olive branch to those who might disagree with me. If after watching this video you still believe that we should all be forced to work, then I'd like to ask you this question. Do you then have a plan for guaranteeing that everyone is able to get a job? Because if you want to force everyone to work but you're not able to provide everyone a job, then your request is not only unreasonable and hypocritical, it is downright impossible. Now, in this video, we covered the economical and technological reasons why a UBI is necessary and we shouldn't have to work. But there is a very good moral philosophical reason we shouldn't have to work either. We explore this more in depth in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.